My name is Susan Harrison. I'm 27, and last week I reached a point I never expected, a moment when someone's disrespect didn't shock me, didn't make me cry, didn't even make me angry. It simply revealed the truth I'd been avoiding for far too long. I live in a one-bedroom apartment that I worked years to afford. My name is on everything: the lease, the utilities, the insurance. 8 months ago, my boyfriend Adrian gradually started staying over more and more until he quietly slipped into living with me full-time. He claimed he paid half the rent, but the reality was a chaotic pattern of late transfers, partial amounts, and constant excuses. I let it slide because that's what love is supposed to look like: patience, compromise, understanding. What I didn't understand was that compromise doesn't work when only one person is doing it. Last night we were sitting on the couch watching a show, the kind where the drama is loud but predictable, when Adrian dropped a sentence that didn't fit the lighting, the room, or the moment. Without looking up from his phone, he said, "By the way, my ex is coming over tomorrow. You'll just have to deal with it." I genuinely thought I misheard him. I paused the TV and turned toward him. "Your ex is what I asked," trying to process the calmness in his voice. He continued scrolling as if discussing weekend errands. "Lila, she's in town for work. I told her she could stop by." He said it so casually, like this wasn't a conversation that required both of us, like this was normal. "You already told her it was okay?" I asked, feeling a slow burn under my ribs. "Susan, don't make it weird," he said finally, glancing up with an annoyed expression. "We're friends. It's been years. You're not going to be one of those insecure girlfriends, are you?" It wasn't insecurity, it was disbelief. I had no issue with his past, but inviting his ex-girlfriend into my home without discussing it wasn't harmless. It was disrespect, plain and simple. "What bothers me is that you didn't ask me before inviting your ex over," I said. He scoffed. "Our apartment," he corrected sharply. "I live here too." "You stay here," I replied. "There's a difference." The eye roll he gave me could have knocked over a building. God, this is exactly why things never worked out with Lila. She didn't blow everything out of proportion. He said it without hesitation, comparing me to the woman he claimed was just a friend. I sat there quietly, letting his words settle. All the late rent, the unilateral decisions, the entitlement, it all aligned in one clear, sharp image. For the first time, I saw Adrian exactly as he was, without excuses and without the soft filter of hope. Finally, I stood up. "You're right," I said. His expression eased instantly. "Really?" "Yeah," I replied, nodding. "You two enjoy." He didn't notice the shift in my tone or the way I was already distancing myself. He didn't follow me to the bedroom. He didn't question why I didn't return to the couch. He went back to watching TV as if nothing had happened. While he watched, I packed. Every article of clothing, every shoe, every charger, every stray item he'd left scattered across my home. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I felt an eerie kind of calm, like a storm had passed, and the air finally smelled clean. It took 2 hours to gather everything. I brought the boxes and bags downstairs to the building entrance and set them neatly in a corner where he'd easily see them. Then I wrote a short note. "You two enjoy the porch. Keys won't work. We're done." By midnight, the locksmith had finished changing all the locks. I climbed into bed while Adrian slept a few feet away, completely unaware. And when I finally closed my eyes, I slept better than I had in months. Adrian found out the next morning, and the explosion started before I even finished making coffee. My phone buzzed violently on the counter, text after text, call after call, his name flashing like an alarm. When I finally glanced, I saw 40 messages stacked on top of each other. "Where is all my stuff? Why is everything outside? The key doesn't work. Answer your phone. You can't do this. I'm calling the cops." I typed one calm reply. "You said your ex was coming over and I'd have to deal with it. I dealt with it. Have a nice life." Seconds later, he called again. I put the phone on speaker and stirred my coffee. "What is wrong with you?" he yelled, his voice cracking between anger and panic. "Nothing," I said. "You wanted your ex over. I didn't, so I made a choice." "You can't just throw me out. I live there." "No, I corrected you, stayed here. Big difference. My name is on the lease, not yours." "This is illegal," he shouted. "You have to give me notice." "You're not a tenant," I said, keeping my tone even. "You were a guest who sometimes paid rent and often didn't. And now you're not a guest anymore." "I'm calling the police." "Great," I said. "Explain to them how you told your current girlfriend you were inviting your ex-girlfriend into her apartment and she'd just have to deal with it. Let me know how that conversation goes." He sputtered, then hung up. I blocked his number and finished my coffee in peace. A few hours later, the building superintendent called. "Hey, Susan, your boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend showed up with some other guy. They tried to get me to let them upstairs. I told them no." "Thanks. Did they take the stuff?" "Most of it. They made a scene, though." He looked embarrassed. The friend looked like he regretted showing up at all. That sounded about right. By the time evening came, the day felt lighter than anything I'd experienced in months. I cleaned the apartment, deep, cleaning the kind that feels like reclaiming territory. I threw out half-used bottles, random junk he'd left everywhere, hair ties and receipts, and little traces of someone who had long overstayed his welcome. When I finished, the air felt clearer. But the quiet didn't last long. 2 days later, my phone rang again from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up. "Is this Susan?" An older woman demanded. No greeting, no introduction. "Yes, this is Adrian's mother. How could you do this to my son? He's sleeping on a couch because of you." I took a slow breath. "Your son invited his ex-girlfriend to my apartment and told me I had no choice but to accept it. I gave him a choice, the door. He has rights. You can't just throw someone out. He was never on the lease. He never paid utilities. He was late on rent constantly. Legally, he was a guest." "We're getting a lawyer," she snapped. "Have him call me." She hung up. No lawyer ever called. Later that week, I walked into the building lobby after work and immediately saw him, Adrian, standing there with 2 friends. One girl, one guy. All 3 of them turned toward me at the same time. Security was already nearby, looking exhausted. "I need clothes for work," Adrian said, arms crossed, like he was the one wronged here. "Text me a list," I replied. "I'll bring them down." "I should be able to get my own stuff," he argued. "No." His female friend stepped forward, tall and trying very hard to look intimidating. "This is ridiculous. Just let him up." "Who are you?" I asked. "His friend," she said, in a tone meant to scare me. "And you're being a real piece of work." "Good to know," I said, still not coming upstairs. Adrian's voice suddenly broke into exaggerated sobbing, loud performative crying, meant for the audience, not the emotion. After everything we had over one mistake, he whimpered. "It wasn't one mistake," I said. "It was a pattern. And you crossed the final line yesterday." Security stepped closer. "Ladies and gentlemen, you need to leave. If you want clothes, send her a list. You can't camp out in the lobby." They were escorted out, the friend giving me a stare that could have set paper on fire. An hour later, Adrian texted a list. I delivered a bag of neatly folded clothes to the superintendent the next morning. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But the real escalation was only just beginning. I should have known the quiet wouldn't last. With Adrian, silence was never peace, it was preparation. The first sign came in the form of a letter slipped under my door. It looked official at first glance, with stiff paper and a bold header from some tenant advocacy group. According to the letter, Adrian had established residency by living with me for more than 6 months, and therefore, I was illegally withholding access and needed to formally evict him through the court system. I read it twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was such an obvious attempt at intimidation. Still, I wanted to be sure, so I called my friend Marcus, a real estate lawyer who had helped me with some paperwork the year before. I sent him a photo. He called me 30 seconds later, laughing so hard he had to catch his breath. "Susan, that's a template they pulled off the internet. It doesn't even apply to your state. Adrian wasn't on the lease, never paid utilities, and has no tenancy agreement. Send your lease proof. He's not listed, and any evidence of missed payments. Certified mail. You're fine." I did exactly that. Unsurprisingly, I never heard back from the advocacy group. But then something new started happening, texts from random numbers. "You're horrible. Real women don't throw their man out. He deserves better. You ruined his life. You're trash." One after another, all from people I didn't know. Adrian had given my number to everyone he could think of to harass me on his behalf. By the 6th number, I stopped blocking and instead called Marcus again. He told me to screenshot everything and save the messages. If this continues, we can pursue harassment charges. But honestly, people like this burn themselves out quickly. He was right. After that night, the messages stopped. For a few days, I actually believed the chaos might taper off. I focused on reclaiming the apartment, rearranging furniture, putting up art. I'd never hung because Adrian once said it looked too feminine, deep cleaning corners he'd cluttered. The more I cleaned, the more oxygen the apartment seemed to have. I hadn't realized how much space he'd taken up, not just physically, but emotionally. Still, the peace didn't last. One Saturday morning, I ran into one of Adrian's coworkers at the grocery store. We had met twice before exchanging polite small talk. She spotted me near the produce aisle. Susan, hey, she said, offering a friendly smile. I heard about the breakup. I'm sorry. It sounded rough. I nodded. It wasn't ideal. She hesitated. He mentioned something about his ex, said you freaked out because she was just in town. It sounded like a misunderstanding. There it was, the lie. The sanitized version Adrian had been feeding to everyone who would listen. He told you she was just visiting, I asked. She nodded again. He didn't mention that he invited her to my apartment. I said, told me I had no choice, and compared me to her when I asked why he didn't discuss it with me first. Her eyes widened so far she looked like she might drop her basket. No, he absolutely did not say that. Of course he didn't. She stood there stunned, quietly recalibrating everything she'd been told. Wow, I'm sorry. That's really different from what he said. It usually is, I replied. She left looking shaken, and for the first time, Adrian's narrative began to crack in places he couldn't control. But the absolute peak of insanity arrived the very next week. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was working from home halfway through a client call when someone started pounding on my apartment door, not knocking, slamming. So hard the doorframe vibrated. I muted my call and looked through the peephole. Adrian. And right beside him, Lila, the ex-girlfriend he insisted was just a friend. Both of them looked furious. Adrian's face was red, jaw clenched, nostrils flaring. Lila looked uncomfortable but determined, as if she had convinced herself she was there on some noble mission. I didn't open the door. I didn't even speak. I just walked back to my desk and unmuted myself. The pounding continued for 5 full minutes. The client on the other end didn't even notice. I'd muted myself to cough earlier, and I guess they assumed it was the same. Eventually, the noise stopped. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again, this time from the building superintendent. Susan, your ex and some woman were down here demanding to be let upstairs, he said. Claimed they needed to get shared property. There is no shared property, I said. Exactly. So I told them no. They said they'd call the cops. I told them to go ahead. He paused, lowering his voice. They both looked ridiculous. That sounds right. Well, security has their photos now, he added. They're banned from the building. If they show up again, we're calling the actual police. I thanked him, hung up, and walked to the window. Down below, I could see Adrian and Lila still arguing. Both of them red-faced, pointing toward the building, like they were the ones being wronged. Adrian gestured wildly, while Lila looked like she regretted every life decision that led her to that sidewalk. Eventually, they both stormed off in opposite directions. That evening, I received one more message, this time from Adrian's mother, from a number I hadn't blocked yet. You destroyed her life. She lost her home and her dignity. I hope you're happy. I replied one last time. Your son tried to bring his ex-girlfriend into my home and told me I had no choice. I chose to end the relationship. Everything after that is him avoiding consequences. He is almost 30. Time to grow up. Then I blocked the number. The next morning, the hallway outside my apartment was finally quiet, peaceful, undisturbed. For the first time, I started to believe the worst of it might finally be over. For a couple of weeks, things actually stayed quiet. No pounding on the door, no fake legal notices, no surprise appearances in the lobby. It wasn't peace in the emotional sense. I was still processing everything that had happened, but it was peaceful in the way a house finally settles after a storm. Still, I knew Adrian. Silence from him wasn't closure, it was buildup. The buildup finally broke on a warm Thursday afternoon. I was walking toward my car after work keys in hand, mentally planning dinner, when someone stepped out from behind a parked sedan. It was Adrian. He looked different, more worn down, almost deflated. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unstyled, and there were dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept properly in days. Susan, wait, he said, raising a hand. No, I replied automatically, not slowing down. He hurried to keep up. Please, just let me talk for a minute. You already talked, I said, repeatedly, loudly, at my door, with your ex-girlfriend, with your mother, with your entire friend group. I think we're done talking. He winced. I know it was bad. I messed up. I was stupid. You were entitled, I corrected. He looked at the ground. Yeah, that too. We reached my car, but he stepped in front of the door before I could open it. I gave him a look that made him slowly move aside, but he didn't walk away. Can we sit in the car or somewhere private? He asked. No, he sighed heavily. Susan, I'm sorry. I really am. The ex thing was dumb. I wasn't thinking. I thought it would be chill. Inviting your ex into my apartment without asking me wasn't chill, Adrian. It was disrespectful. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking like he wanted to disappear. I know that now. Everything blew up so fast, and I handled it horribly. My mom, my friends. It all got out of control. Because you let it, I said. He didn't argue. There was a pause long enough that I could have gotten in my car and left, but something in his expression made me stay a moment longer. He looked hollow, not sad, empty. Finally, he said, I can't afford my own place. I'm barely making rent crashing with my friend. I'm trying to get back on my feet, but it's hard. There it was. Not I miss you. Not I realize what I lost. Not I want us back. Just I need stability. You're not asking for me, I said quietly. You're asking for a place to live. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but he closed it again. That told me everything. You should have thought about that, I said, before you tried to bring your ex into my home and told me I had no choice. His face twisted in frustration. So that's it. You're just done. I was done the moment you showed me who you really were. He shook his head, almost desperate. Please, Susan, it's been, 10 days? People make mistakes. It wasn't one mistake, I said. It was the last one. He stared at me for a moment, and then his composure cracked. You're heartless, he spit out suddenly. You didn't even try. I opened my car door. I tried for months. You ignored every chance you were given. I got in, shut the door, and started the engine. As I pulled away, he stood there watching me go. Arms limp at his sides, face slack with disbelief and anger he didn't know where to put. I didn't look back again. That night, something shifted in me. There was no triumph, no satisfaction, just relief. The kind of relief that comes when you finally stop carrying something so heavy you didn't realize it was crushing you. 2 quiet weeks passed. Quiet enough that I stopped expecting ambushes outside my apartment or letters slipped under my door. The emotional dust settled and life began to move again. I picked up new routines, long walks after work, cooking full meals instead of stress snacking, even rearranging the living room furniture. The apartment felt different, lighter, larger, completely mine. I hadn't realized how many invisible compromises I'd made to accommodate someone who never planned to reciprocate them. Then one morning, I stopped at a coffee shop before work. I ordered my usual, stepped aside to wait, and heard the door chime behind me. Adrian walked in. He froze. I froze. For a moment, everything around us blurred. He looked worse than before. His clothes were baggy, his hair unwashed, and he held himself like someone who'd been shrinking a little more each day. Hi, he said quietly. Hi. We stood there in awkward silence until my order was ready. I took the cup thinking we'd part ways without another word. Can we talk? Just for a minute, he asked, voice low. I considered walking out. Truly considered it. But something in his tone wasn't manipulative or annoyed, it was defeated. Against my better judgment, I sat with him at a small corner table. He didn't look at me right away. He just stared at the cup in his hands. I'm sorry, he began. For everything. For the ex thing, for my mom, for my friends, for showing up at your building. All of it. I handled everything wrong. I didn't say anything. He continued. I was entitled. I thought because I lived there, I could do what I wanted. And when you didn't let me, I couldn't handle it. That's accurate, I said. He nodded, almost grateful I wasn't arguing. I'm living with my parents again, he admitted. Had to quit my job because the commute was too far. I'm working retail now, barely making anything. I listened, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not the old kind, the enabling kind. Just a distant understanding. And Lila, I asked? He let out a humorless laugh. That lasted about a week. She said I had too much drama. I couldn't help raising an eyebrow. Interesting. Yeah, I deserved it. I had something good and I ruined it because I didn't want to admit I was wrong, and because I wanted to do whatever I wanted. He looked up at me, finally, eyes tired expression, stripped of ego. I'm not asking to get back together, he said. I know that's not happening. I just wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not with anyone else involved. I nodded. I appreciate that. You were right about everything, he said softly. I took advantage. I thought you'd just keep covering for me forever. My chest tightened, not because I missed him, but because I finally understood how long I'd allowed it. He stood up. That's all I wanted to say. Take care, Susan. Then he walked out before I could respond. I sat there with my coffee for a long time after realizing something important. The apology didn't change the past, but it did close the door. Finally. After that day in the cafe, something in my life finally truly shifted. Not because Adrian apologized, but because his apology confirmed something I'd quietly known, yet never fully accepted. I had spent months lowering the volume of my own discomfort to accommodate someone who never intended to do the same for me. His words didn't undo anything. They simply clarified the path I was already walking. The following weeks unfolded with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. My apartment, for the first time since Adrian moved in, felt like mine again, unapologetically mine. I rearranged the living room, donated old clutter, replaced the couch with one I actually loved, and even painted an accent wall, a soft forest green. Every change felt symbolic, a small rebellion against the compromises I had once accepted as normal. Financially, things balanced themselves more quickly than I expected. Without covering someone else's late rent, groceries, or emergencies that weren't emergencies, my savings finally grew instead of shrinking. I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until I put it down. Friends who knew the full story checked in. Some were surprised by the breakup. The observant ones were not. A few even admitted they'd noticed Adrian taking advantage, but didn't want to cause relationship drama by telling me. I didn't hold it against them. People see things when they're ready to. My parents, when I eventually shared the short version, reacted exactly how I expected. My dad nodded and simply said he needed to grow up. My mom hugged me and told me she was proud I stood up for myself. There was no drama, no lectures, just quiet support, which was exactly what I needed. Life settled into a comfortable routine, one that didn't revolve around waiting for someone else's chaos to erupt. I cooked more, walked more, slept deeply, and started reading again, all the things I used to enjoy before running emotional interference for someone else's ego. Around that time, I began seeing someone new. His name is Evan, a 33-year-old nurse with a calm presence and a grounded way of speaking that somehow makes every room feel steadier. We met through mutual friends at a small gathering, and the first thing I noticed was how effortlessly he listened, genuinely listened when I spoke. That alone felt like a luxury. Our early dates were simple dinner coffee, long conversations about work, family, and the unglamorous realities of adult life. He had his own place, his own career, his own routines. There was no hint of entitlement or expectation, no subtle pressure for me to fix, accommodate, or absorb. Everything about him felt balanced. One night at dinner, the check came, and before I could reach for it, he placed his card down. When I insisted on splitting, he smiled and said, "Only if it makes you comfortable, not because you feel obligated." That sentence alone drew a clear line between him and Adrian, who viewed bills as something I handled unless he felt generous that week. At some point, I told Evan the entire story about Adrian. I didn't dramatize it or minimize it. I simply told the truth. His response was calm and steady. "You respected your boundaries," he said. "That matters. No judgment, no questions twisting the story, just understanding." Being with someone like that made me realize how much emotional noise I had normalized, how much tension I'd accepted as part of being with someone, how many times I'd convinced myself that stability was optional, but love was worth the hassle. Now I understood that respect was the baseline, not an achievement. A month or so after the cafe, the superintendent mentioned one final footnote. Apparently, Adrian returned to the building once more, asking if he could drop something off for me. The superintendent told him to mail it. Adrian didn't leave anything. He just left. Hearing that didn't sting. It didn't spark anything. It simply confirmed what I already felt. The chapter was truly finally closed. In the end, I didn't get justice in some dramatic, cinematic way. I didn't need to. What I got was clarity and peace. That was enough. I learned that when someone shows you who they are, even if it's in small moments, you need to believe them. I learned that boundaries aren't ultimatums. They're self-respect and practice. And I learned that being alone is far better than sharing a home with someone who acts like your needs are an inconvenience. Some people said I was harsh, that I should have talked it out more, that maybe Adrian had been struggling. But those same people didn't see the months of excuses, the late rent, the entitlement, the casual disrespect. They didn't hear him tell me I'd just have to deal with an ex-girlfriend walking into the home I paid for. They didn't see the moment his face showed me exactly who he was. I saw it, and once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. I don't feel guilty. I don't regret how I handled it. I don't wish I'd given him one more chance. I'm grateful. I chose myself when I'd been taught to choose someone else first. Today, my apartment is mine, peaceful, calm, full of things I love, and none of the things I tolerated. And Evan, he's wonderful. But even if it doesn't work out, I'll be fine, because now I know this being alone